In this video, I'm going to build a small table using the top of an old government desk as a tabletop, some old 2x4s, and just minimal tools, a circular saw, a drill, a doweling jig, and then a few other bits that I need to put this together. So these two pieces of wood glued together is actually my cross-cutting jig for the circular saw, and it's just a square, and I need to line up the end of this with where the cut needs to be, and I just clamp that in place, and this guides the saw. I'm going to taper the legs a little bit towards the bottom to make them look a little more elegant. So I want the bottom of the legs to be about 5 centimeters wide, and the taper isn't going to come all the way up to the top because I want the legs still to be rectangular at the top. And I'll just use the other leg here as a straight edge. So the circular saw leaves a bit of a rough surface, so I'm just going to use a hand plane to smooth this out. And I've got some sharp edges now, so I'll chamfer those. And they're going to go together like this, and then like this, and that will form one end of the table. To make a very rigid connection, I'm going to join this with dowels, like so, using this doweling jig. This doweling jig has got different size holes for different size drills, but it's only got one hole for the 1/2 inch, which is the size dowel I'm going to be using. And I'm going to use multiple dowels on here, so I have to be very careful with how I position this jig so that the dowel holes will line up. And the drill has got a bit that's much longer than I need for these holes, so I made this sleeve to put over the drill bit, and that will control exactly how far I want to drill in. It would be easier to flip the jig around for this last hole, but I want to measure everything with respect to this edge to make sure my measurements are all consistent. So now I need to drill some holes to put dowels in here, and this doweling jig doesn't open up far enough to go around here, plus I want the holes to one side. So I'm going to take this jig and I'm actually going to disassemble it. So once this is opened all the way, this outside jaw comes almost off, so just loosen these screws here. And now if I turn the sleeve, I can pop this jaw off. And now if I put this on here, that can guide me, but it's a little bit loose because I can't clamp this on both sides. So I made a spacer to go in here. And now if I clamp this tight, that makes for a fairly rigid connection between this part and this part. And now to fix that in place, I'm just going to attach it with a clamp. So putting those two pieces together, visually those holes line up very well, so I'm sure that joint will fit. Very important, the leg that mates with this one has to be a mirror image, otherwise it won't fit together right at all. Which means I need to come from the other edge, and the way I had my doweling jig before, that just doesn't work here. So for the last hole I'm going to be almost off of this thing. And the tricky part is I also have to measure this differently, but I worked it out that the first hole has to be when the jig is at 42 millimeters this way. So those joints close nicely already, so even without clamps this would be good. But because I have clamps, and just to be safe, I'm going to put this on here while the glue dries. So this pair of legs is going to join this apron rail here, and I want to cut a rabbet here for it to fit together like that. And I'm going to use my circular saw to cut that out with the saw guide here. So with the rabbets cut in the apron rails, that goes on here, and I'm not going to glue this part because I want to be able to take it apart again. And so I'm going to just screw it. I'm going to put screws in here and here, and that should hold it plenty tight. So this now goes on here with the holes pre-drilled, and I'm just going to hold this in place with the clamp. So I need to attach the top somehow, and probably the best way would be with pocket holes, but I don't have a pocket hole jig. So I'm just going to sink the screw in all the way from the bottom, and I am again going to use my doweling jig just to guide the drill. Now this drill is just barely long enough to reach through there if I put just the end of it in the drill. So that completes the pilot hole. And now if I put a screw into this hole, that sticks just far enough into the tabletop. I'd use my drill to put the screw in, but it's not long enough. Sturdy and all done.